Hi, it's Katrina. Today we are diving deep into the epics that define not only ancient Greece, but Western civilization. Homer's The Iliad and the Odyssey, the most epic pair of poems ever.
For more than 2,000 years, Greek mythology has been treated as a foundation of culture, not history. Stories meant to explain the world, not record it. Gods intervened in human affairs. Heroes performed impossible feats. Cities rose and fell at the whim of fate. To modern eyes, these tales have long belonged to literature, not archaeology. But over the last century, and increasingly in recent decades, something uncomfortable has begun to emerge. Piece by piece, the physical world has started to line up with stories once dismissed as pure myth. Burned cities, fortified walls, weapons, palaces, and now submerged structures and ritual sites that appear to honor figures we were told never existed. The deeper archaeologists dig, on land and beneath the sea, the harder it becomes to maintain a clean divide between legend and reality. This is not the story of gods walking the earth. It is the story of how myth may preserve memory, distorted, exaggerated, poetic, but rooted in events, places, and people who were real. And it begins with a poet who may never have existed at all. The Iliad and the Odyssey stand at the center of Western storytelling. Composed more than 2,500 years ago, these epics shaped how civilizations understood war, heroism, loyalty, and loss. They introduced characters whose names still carry weight: Achilles, Hector, Agamemnon, Odysseus. For centuries, scholars argued that these figures were no more historical than dragons or giants. Even the author was uncertain. Homer, the blind bard of tradition, may have been one man, many poets, or an invented name attached to a long oral tradition. Yet whoever composed these works preserved a world that was already ancient by the time it was written, a Bronze Age landscape remembered through generations of storytelling. The Iliad does not begin with triumph. It opens with rage. A war already 10 years old. A conflict stalled, bloody, and meaningless. At its center is Achilles, the greatest warrior among the Greeks, who refuses to fight after being publicly humiliated by King Agamemnon.
It begins with Achilles, the greatest warrior among the Greeks, storming out of the war and having a temper tantrum.
This is not a tale of heroes rushing toward glory. It is a study of pride, resentment, and the cost of ego. The war itself, according to the story, began with Helen of Sparta. Whether she was abducted or left willingly with Paris of Troy remains ambiguous even in the ancient texts. What mattered was the result. Greek kings bound by oath rallied under Agamemnon and sailed across the Aegean to lay siege to Troy. 1,000 ships, according to tradition, not as a literal number, but as a symbol of scale. For generations, Troy itself was thought to be fictional. That changed in the 19th century, when excavations at Hisarlik in modern Turkey uncovered the ruins of a fortified city destroyed by fire around 1200 BCE. Not one city, but many layered atop each other. Walls shattered, weapons embedded in stone. Evidence of violent collapse during the same period traditionally associated with the Trojan War. Homer had described a city of towers and gates. Archaeology found one. The match was not perfect. Myth never is, but the timing aligned, the geography aligned, and the scale of destruction aligned with a broader event now known as the Bronze Age collapse, when major civilizations across the Mediterranean, Mycenaean Greece, the Hittites, Ugarit, fell within a short span of time. The Iliad, written centuries later, may not document the collapse accurately, but it remembers its trauma. Within that memory stands Hector, Prince of Troy. Unlike Achilles, Hector fights not for glory, but for duty. He knows Troy is doomed. He fights anyway. In Homer's telling, Hector becomes the moral center of the poem. a man trapped by honor, family, and fate. When Achilles returns to battle after the death of his closest companion, Patroclus, the story reaches its darkest point. Hector is killed. His body is desecrated. War strips even heroes of humanity. And yet, the Iliad does not end with conquest. It ends with grief. King Priam of Troy enters the enemy camp alone, kneels before Achilles, and begs for his son's body. Achilles weeps. The war pauses. Humanity briefly reasserts itself. The poem ends not with victory, but with a funeral. This was not how propaganda was written, which raises an important question. Why preserve this story at all, unless it reflected something deeply remembered? For centuries, scholars accepted Troy, but rejected its heroes. Achilles was myth. Ajax was fiction. Odysseus belonged to fantasy. That assumption is now under pressure. In 2022, underwater archaeologists working off the coast of Salamis discovered the remains of a submerged ancient city. Beneath shallow waters lay the foundations of a stoa, a long colonnaded structure used for public life in Greek cities. The dimensions were unmistakable, over 100 feet long, carefully planned, civic, not domestic. Among the ruins, archaeologists recovered a marble relief depicting a bearded warrior being crowned. The style, posture, and symbolism immediately drew attention. Ancient sources describe a temple to Ajax on Salamis, including a statue of the hero himself. The relief closely matches that description. Ajax, cousin of Achilles and one of the greatest Greek champions at Troy, was said to hail from Salamis. Ancient geographers like Pausanias recorded shrines dedicated to him centuries after the war. Now, archaeology had found physical evidence of such veneration. This does not prove Ajax fought at Troy. It proves something else. For centuries, people believed he did. They built temples. They left offerings. They treated him not as a story, but as a figure worthy of worship and remembrance. Myth had become cult. Memory had become ritual. This pattern repeats across the Greek world. Shrines dedicated to heroes described by Homer appear in multiple locations. Inscriptions bearing names once dismissed as fictional appear on stone. Coins, votives, and offerings accumulate across centuries. The Greeks themselves did not treat these stories as inventions. They treated them as history remembered through poetry. That same tension exists in the Odyssey, the companion epic that follows the Trojan War's aftermath. Where the Iliad is about rage, the Odyssey is about survival. Odysseus does not win through strength. He survives through intelligence, deception, endurance, and restraint. His journey home takes 10 years. Monsters, storms, seduction, betrayal, and loss stand between him and Ithaca. Many of these encounters are overtly mythological: cyclopes, sirens, visits to the underworld. But beneath the fantasy lies something else. The Odyssey preserves detailed knowledge of Bronze Age seafaring, coastal navigation, trade routes, and island geography. It describes palaces consistent with Mycenaean architecture, social customs that match archaeological findings, rituals that align with known practices of the era. Odysseus himself, like Ajax, may not have been a single man. But on Ithaca, archaeologists have uncovered something remarkable: a sanctuary dedicated to Odysseus. Excavations led by Greek researchers revealed inscriptions invoking his name, offerings left by pilgrims, coins from across the Greek and Roman worlds. The site spans centuries, indicating long-term reverence. Even more striking, beneath the sanctuary lies a much older structure, a rock-cut cistern dating to the 13th or 14th century BCE, the period traditionally associated with the Trojan War. The site was important long before Homer's poems were written. Once again, myth overlays memory. The question is no longer whether Greek mythology is real in a literal sense. The question is how much of it preserves distorted history. Homer did not invent the Bronze Age. He inherited fragments of it, stories passed down through generations of singers who remembered cities that burned, kings who ruled, wars that ended worlds. Over centuries, gods were added. Monsters crept in, but the core remained. Archaeology continues to confirm that core. Troy existed. Mycenaean palaces existed. Hero cults existed. People worshipped figures we call mythical as if they were real ancestors. Myth, it turns out, may be history written in a different language. Not a record of facts, but a record of meaning. Greek mythology does not tell us exactly what happened. It tells us what people remembered mattered. And the more we uncover, the clearer it becomes that these stories were not created in a vacuum. They were anchored to places, events, and lives that once shaped the ancient world. The line between myth and history is not a wall, it is a fog, and archaeology, slowly, is burning it away.